Welcome back to TNLP, the newsletter podcast brought to you by the HazMat Guys. Timmy here, bringing you this week's top hazmat stories from around the U.S. Without wasting any time, we head out to San Diego, California, where a vehicle ended up in a creek and turned into a small but very real environmental hazmat situation. According to reporting from Fox 5 San Diego, first responders were called out around 9 a.m. after a blue Hyundai Tucson was discovered sitting in a creek near State Route 52 and Genesee Avenue, right by Marion Bear Memorial Park. Now, here's where it gets a little strange. Crews arrived, checked the vehicle, and found nobody inside. No driver, no passengers, and no airbags deployed. Which raises some questions about how the car actually got there in the first place. Initial observations suggested the vehicle may have come off the highway off-ramp and ended up down in the creek. But regardless of how it got there, the bigger issue quickly became what it was leaking into the water. Fuel and oil were observed coming out of the vehicle and entering the creek, which immediately brings hazmat into play. Because now you're not just dealing with a vehicle recovery, you're dealing with environmental contamination in a flowing waterway. Hazmat teams were called in to contain and clean up the petroleum products before they could spread further downstream. And this is one of those incidents that doesn't look dramatic from the outside, but it can get complicated fast depending on flow rate, volume, and how long it's been leaking before anyone notices. No injuries reported, no occupants found, just a car that showed up uninvited and started polluting a creek. Always a fun one to explain in the after-action report. From there, we head over to West Virginia, where a routine maintenance issue turned into a full-on hazmat and salvage operation after a ferry sank in Sistersville. According to reporting from WTAP, city officials were first alerted that the ferry was taking on water late last week. Crews attempted to manage the situation, but right out of the gate, they ran into equipment issues. The city had planned to use a vacuum truck to remove water from the vessel, but it was out of service. So they pivoted to pumps. Problem was, the ferry's position made it extremely difficult to actually move the water. The barge section was sitting at an elevation that basically worked against them, preventing effective drainage. So in an attempt to fix the problem, they brought in a forklift to reposition the vessel. And this is where things went sideways. Once they pushed it into the water to try and get better access, the ferry sank. Fast, we're talking 1 to 2 minutes, and it was gone. At that point, the incident shifted immediately from let's save the ferry to let's protect the environment. The U.S. Coast Guard made it clear the top priority was cleanup, as fuel and other contaminants from the vessel now posed a risk to the surrounding waterway. Cleanup crews, including Clean Harbors out of Pennsylvania, were brought in along with local fire and law enforcement agencies to manage the situation. Now they're looking at salvage costs that could start around $100,000 just to raise and move the ferry, not even counting repairs. Cause of the initial water intrusion is still unclear, but officials suspect damage from high water events earlier in the winter may have played a role. Either way, what started as a maintenance issue turned into a sinking vessel, environmental hazard, and a very expensive problem, which is usually how these things go. Wrapping things up this week, we head to Aurora, Illinois, where a bleach spill inside a semi-trailer triggered a hazmat response and a reminder of how fast everyday chemicals can become a problem. According to WSPY News, crews were dispatched around 10:25 a.m. to the 2700 block of Beverly Drive for a reported hazardous materials incident. Inside the trailer, a container of concentrated bleach had been punctured, releasing about 30 gallons. Now, bleach doesn't always get the same reaction as some of the more exciting chemicals, but concentrated sodium hypochlorite is no joke, especially when it starts moving where it shouldn't. Some of that product made its way into nearby storm drains, which immediately raises the stakes, because now you're dealing with potential environmental spread, not just a contained spill. Fire crews work to contain the release, secure the damaged container, and recover as much product as possible from nearby catch basins. A private contractor was brought in to assist with cleanup, and the road was temporarily shut down while operations were underway. Eventually, the situation was brought under control and the roadway reopened. No injuries reported. But again, this is one of those incidents that looks simple on paper, until it's in the storm system, and now you're chasing it. Kind of reminds me of a drill you'd find in one of the nerd books. You'll have to find out which on your own. Get Volume 1 and 2 now at thehazmatguys.com. That's going to do it for this week's Top Hazmat News. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next week. Timmy, over and out.